Hello, I'm Heide, and this is my colleague Charlotte Simonsson. And we are going to present a paper that is based on an early literature review for a new 3-year research project on internal crisis communication. We're going to study a merger between two university hospitals in Sweden, in southern Sweden, with 12,500 employees. And this is a case of a very good example of birth and change process and crisis situation. The merger took place January 1st, 2010, and there are right now very many protests from the medical staff. Our starting point is that there are importantly relations between crisis and changes, but they are often considered as two distinct phenomena and has evolved, as you know, as two separate research fields. The relations are as we see it, very obvious when we take an internal communication perspective and focusing on co-workers' sense-making processes. Since changes as well as crisis can be seen as threatening, evoking strong emotions of fear, anxiety among co-workers. And this situation triggers sense-making and communication processes in order to make sense of the situation. We mean that both fields of crisis communication and change communication, there is a profound need for an alternative perspective focusing on co-workers' communication and studying local emergent process with observation and interviews. Our aim is twofold. The first aim is to discuss and elucidate the relationship between the two research fields of change communication and crisis communication. The second aim is to propose a co-worker perspective in the study of internal communication, vertical as well as horizontal, in situation of crisis and change.
And we think it's possible to discern two broad theoretical approaches within both change and crisis communication. We have named these approaches the episodic and the emergent perspective, and we have summarized them in the table which you can see here. As concerns the view of phenomena, we think that within both change and crisis have traditionally been portrayed as linear phenomena developing through distinct firm phases. The emergent, the alternative perspective, on the other hand, focuses on change and crisis as unpredictable processes without a clear beginning and end. And from a philosophy of science perspective, view of reality, we can see that the episodic perspective is linked to a view of organization as rational, controllable systems, whereas the emergent perspective regards crisis and changes as complex, dynamic, and socially constructed. And when it comes to management focus, we can see some traces of this view of reality. The rational idea of organization is linked to a strong focus on a strong management focus on plans, checklists, and instructions. But according to the emergent perspective, each situation is unique, which means that organization members, leaders and co-workers has to be able to improvise, make situated decisions rather than rely on a pre-written plan. When it comes to view of communication, the episodic perspective is linked to a view of communication as a tool. For instance, in change processes, communication is a means to reduce employee resistance. As concerns the other perspective, the emergent perspective, we see that communication is seen as having a constituting role. And this means that it is the co-workers and their feelings, interpretation and actions that are put in the center rather than just the senior management's plans and decisions. In the following, from this, we want to discuss some implications from the emergent perspective for internal communication in uncertain and ambiguous situations. And more precisely, we discuss two themes, vertical and horizontal communication. And just briefly here about vertical communication, we can see that there is a widespread faith in today's leadership, in today's society, that leaders are more or less our modern superheroes. And in this paper, we contrast this heroic view of leadership with a post-heroic view of leadership. And according to this post-heroic view, leadership should be seen as a relational, co-constructed, and dialogic process rather than as a monologue where leaders transfers meaning to passive employees. Of course, we know that there are some barriers to interactive sense-making, and we think and argue in the paper that we really should try to learn more about this interaction between managers and employees in times of crisis and change.
Internal communication between co-workers is a prerequisite for the existence of organizations, conversations and interactions between co-workers in everyday life is fundamental for organizing. And we believe that the horizontal communication is the most important, most important kind of communication. Through horizontal communication, co-workers generate understanding and produce knowledge. And we believe that social media can give new possibilities for co-workers' horizontal communication. Social media make some of informal communication visible and accessible to other co-workers. And this informal communication and ongoing dialogue through, for example, organization blogging can lessen some frustration when organization information is sparse and can be important for co-workers' understanding. Some concluding remarks.
Yes. Firstly, we conclude that it is time to start treating change and crisis as two allied fields. Rather than defining a situation as a crisis or a change, it seems more fruitful to focus on the specific communication challenges that tend to be dominant in a current situation. Secondly, crisis communication, as you know, has traditionally been focused on external communication. But in order to bring the research field one step further, it's time to start focusing on internal aspects. But rather than treating and seeing employees as a specific stakeholder group, we want to stress that it is the employees and the relations among them that actually constitute the organization.
So we propose that we need to more analyze the practices of co-workers and study the actual communication processes to see what's happening. And by focusing on co-workership, post-hierarchical leadership and social media, we hopefully will get new potential for participatory crisis communication models. And thank you for your attention.